Okay, so finally we come to the end of chapter 12, which is the sort of transition into the book of from the book of signs to the book of glory, and there's this final verdict given against those who reject Jesus. Now, often it's entitled something like "The Jews continue in their unbelief." I object to that title. Really, the point is that actually unbelievers continue in their unbelief, right? Because Jews and Gentiles can become believers, Jews and Gentiles can not be believers. All right, and so really the condemnation is of those who refuse, and it's all in accordance with prophecy. Here we have some quotes from Isaiah about them just stubbornly refusing to believe. All right. And I think it's one of the ironies of the book of signs, because the signs are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ. The signs are written to prove. The signs are written to show you things about the identity of Christ. And yet at the same time, there's this, those quotes like we saw in chapter 4, about, wicked and adulterous generation seeks a sign, and there's this constant rebuke. Why do you need signs? You shouldn't need signs, because you should just believe. And it comes back to the old saying, like, for a believing heart no miracle is needed, for an unbelieving heart no miracle is ever enough. And so there's this real rebuke, and I think that in some ways is echoed in the words of to Thomas right at the end. Blessed are those who have believed and not seen. And it's like you shouldn't need these signs. Okay, so the fact that they're unbelievers is simply because they're unbelievers. It's as simple as that. They are what they are, and you think, oh, if they saw a miracle then they believe. No, they won't. No, they won't, because you're not up against that. You're actually up against their heart, the condition of their heart, and that's down to their personality. Also, of course, actually we see here that God has a hand in it, because it says, like, he has blinded their eyes. In verse 40, he has blinded their eyes. Quote from Isaiah. Who has blinded their eyes? It's God. It's like, it goes back to Exodus. God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Wow. It's like, well, would God make somebody to be an unbeliever? And of course, like, we try to work around it. We ask questions like, well, does he just harden their hearts because they're inclined to unbelief anyway? Why doesn't he do the opposite? Why doesn't he soften their hearts to bring them to faith? And there's a lot of questions there which spill over into predestination and election and God's sovereignty and free will, and it's a Gordian's knot. You'll never really untangle it. I'm sure that we'll understand one day when we see Jesus face to face, but for the time being we've just got to seek the Lord and pray and trust in the Lord, because there are many things which are beyond us. Okay, now there are those who think, no, it's this, or no, it's that, and they go for one or the other. They always do so at the expense of simplification. They have to overlook one sign or another, because for me the whole thing is a paradox. And I love the old saying, like, take the paradox from a theologian and I'll give you a heretic. The truth is, this is a mystery. The truth is that there's a real conundrum here, because God does indeed harden their hearts, and yet he judges them for being unbelievers, which is even more remarkable, because you think, well, how can you judge somebody if it's God who's hardened their hearts? But God, in his wisdom, he is fair, he is just, he always does what is right. Fair and just doesn't mean what we like, or what suits me. Fair and just is what is right in the eyes of God, which is always absolute. Okay, he is the one who does understand these paradoxes. He is the one who does have the answers, and so therefore we trust him to do what is right. Okay, without we question these things in the sense that we seek understanding, that we search the wonders of God, we search the mysteries, but not questioning in the sense that we're challenging God, like, who are you to do this? I mean, who is the axe to say to the one who wields it? Who is the potter? What is the clay to say to the potter, like, what are you making me into? God is sovereign. Okay, and that is the final verdict of John's gospel, really, is that these people are unbelievers because they're unbelievers. And it's as simple as that. It really is. You think that after all these signs that they would believe, but that is the condemnation against them, because they've been given all of the evidence, they've been given all of the proof, they've seen it with their own eyes, they've even felt it with their own hands, they've witnessed these things, they've experienced these things, and still they will not believe, because that is where their heart is really at. All right. And the thing is, there's this real challenge as you come here. Like, many of them believed in him, even the leaders, but because of the Pharisees, they would not confess their faith for fear of being put out of the synagogue. They loved praise from men more than praise from God. Right, this is the challenge to anybody who's read up to this point. Maybe a Jewish man or woman who's read this up to this point, and then they think, like, I've got to make a choice. I either believe in Jesus and get kicked out of the synagogue and my community and my family even, or I turn my back on God. Who do I turn my back on? There's this real stark choice. You either be right with God or you be right with men. Take your pick. And sad to say, many people who claim to be Christians still kowtow to their families, still kowtow to the pressures of society. They don't want to stick out too much. But look, sometimes we have to deal with that. And, there's this discussion that we get onto with Joseph of Arimathea. He's a secret disciple. Well, either the secrecy is going to destroy the discipleship, or the discipleship will destroy the secrecy, because you cannot help but speak out. And you've seen that with Nicodemus. Chapter 7, he speaks up. Does our law condemn a man without hearing what he has to say? He said, what are you with him as well? Peter, of course, when he's challenged and he denies Jesus, and there's got to be this choice. Either you're going to be a secret and not a disciple, or you're going to be a disciple and there's no secret. And so there's this real challenge that comes here at this culmination of the gospel, of the book of signs, I should say. That this turning point in the gospel, whereby the reader has got to make a choice. And the challenge is there, for the person who hears my words but does not keep them. I do not judge him. It's strange, because of course all judgment has been given into his hands, but it would appear that there are different levels of judgment, but we're not going to get into that just yet. All right, because there's not enough detail here. But it speaks of his role and the role of the Father, and there's this profound moment where it's basically, make your mind up. What's going to happen? What are you going to do? All right. So I think that sort of concludes chapter 12. There are lots of other things I could have mentioned, of course, but now we go into the Paschal Discourse and the beginning of the Book of Glory. All right. So that's really the jewel in the crown. We'll probably go into a little bit more detail in much of the Paschal Discourse, because there's some really, really chunky theology there. Beautiful. I look forward to it.